on the Bubble Podcast, episode 113. I'm your host, Bossa J. Wait on me is my co-host, Yuki Lee Bender. Today we're going to be doing our episode on how to draft Marylnn. I guess before we talk about Marylnn, we just had our Nats. How did you do, Yuki?
Yeah, I ended up cashing. I came in 23rd, I believe. It was top 24 to cash. I had a really good day one. I went 7-2, 2-1 in CC, 5-1 in draft, drafting Puffin for a 3-0 and Gravy Bones for a 2-1. I lost in the finals of the second pod. And then day two did not go my way. I went 0-3 in CC. I think combination of not really having enough rest and not playing super well in day two. I was looking at my stream game and there was definitely like multiple spots where I didn't make good decisions. And my deck also didn't exactly do me any favors. I registered Bolton for the event, which I thought was actually a pretty good meta call, and I was pretty happy with my deck choice. But Via the Vanguard is one of the better cards in Bolton, and I think I got to resolve one Via the Vanguard across all the games of CC that I played. So that kind of gives you an idea of how I was drawing that weekend. I think with better play, I maybe could have had a shot, but yeah, the deck also wasn't doing me favors.
Fair enough. Are you going to post the deck lists on like Patreon or something?
Yeah, you can expect that to be coming out probably by the time this episode is posted, I would imagine. You can expect Bolton content. You can also expect Gravy Bones content as well, as that was the other deck I was sort of working on for Nationals. I ultimately decided to take Bolton, but yeah, I want to have like the deck list and sideboard guides up for those, and then some how to play guides, probably like a complete one for Bolton and maybe a partial one for Gravy Bones that covers things I've learned since writing the 0 to 80 article for LSS, but not, there's no point covering the stuff that was already covered in that article. So I'll reference that article. I think a lot of stuff from that article still holds, but definitely have some new learnings since the initial weeks of the format. So yeah, you can expect to see all that on Patreon in the coming weeks.
You also just want to do a Patreon shout out then?
Yeah, so thank you so much to all of our patrons. We really appreciate what you do and that you give back to the show. It really helps us continue what we're doing. We're really thankful for everything that you do for us. How about you, Jay? How did your Nationals weekend go?
My Nationals weekend was actually reasonable. It's I started day one at 6-3. I played Victor Goldmane, and a really good choice actually for the matchups I actually got. And I'm actually not even unhappy with my Gravy matchup, so I was pretty happy to bring that deck. I went 2-1 in CC day one, and then I went 3-0 in draft, then 1-2, being in the same pot as Yuki. And on day two CC, I went 2-1 with an X4 record, and I got like 18th, I think. It's almost exactly the same as Yuki in the sense of we min cashed because 9th to 24th was all the same cash.
Yeah. And I was like, we were kind of like all in contention. You needed to X3 to make top 8, and I think almost maybe all but one X3 made it, something like that. A lot of the X3s made it. So yeah, we were kind of like both in contention. Our second draft pod on day one was crazy. It was not the featured pod, but it felt like it could have been. It was like Jay and myself, Michael Jazaker, Sean Dollywall. Who else was there? Matthew Dilks, calling winner. Daniel Dreitziger, who has top 8 Nationals 3 times? 2 times? I think 3 times. So yeah, that and I forget the other two. But we had a lot of crushers on that pod, and yeah, I was happy to make the finals and eventually lose to Sean in that pod, given how stiff it was. But yeah, there was some very strong players in that pod that did not do well just because some people have to lose in a draft pod. Like somebody has to be the 0-3, and it's just like, oh, it's tough.
Yeah, it was a really tough pod, and the draft portion was kind of tough too. My favorite part of this is Sean Dollywall is like, you know what? This pod's so hard, I'm not gonna pivot, and he just like pack one, picks one Puffins, and just runs with it and doesn't get punished.
Yeah, we just fed him Puffin. I actually think my Gravy Bones deck was pretty crazy too. Maybe we can touch on it a little bit in the Gravy Bones episode, but I did have like 2 Rigor Mortis, a Swabby, 6 total allies, and 6 golden tipples across different pitches. And the secret about my deck was that it really didn't block very well, but man, did it do a lot of damage? And then at some point, Sean was just like, "You're at 8 with like 2 equipment. I think I can kill you. Here's 20 damage to your face." And I just exploded. And I was like, huh, I kind of needed you to kill the Swabby so that I could like hit my pitch deck and kill you. But you just like exploded me instead.
Yeah, that's what Puffin gets to do. So
Yeah, absolutely. He was like playing it so mid range. I was just like, oh, I don't have to worry. His deck's not that explosive. Then he's like Cogworks Dovetail. I was like, oh, it's not good for me.
yeah, he has a lot of powerful cards in that deck. The Talking about Sean though, in my day one CC matches, I played against Sean round one of this event, and he was on Syndra, and I was on Victor Goldmane. I lost that matchup. I was very sad. Like, man, that matchup is supposed to be like 80-20 or even probably like 90-10 for like Victor. But what ended up happening was like Sean won 2 clashes, I won 2 clashes. So, a bunch of people like walked by the table to see our game, and then they're just like, why does Sean have a might token and a gold token? Like, what happened this game? And I'm like, I lost clashes this game. And I also tied a bunch as well. So man, that game was cursed.
Yeah, that is kind of the Victor Goldmane special. You build your deck in this way where you're supposed to win all the clashes, but you still just have zeros that you can flip because you just have good cards like, your block cards, your pummels that you probably have to play, your riches, your cast homes, and you're just like, sometimes you lose. And the worst feeling is when you like trounce one of those good cards to the bottom, or you have to spend a gold to try and win the clash and put one of those good cards to the bottom, and then you lose the clash anyways. Yeah, Victor definitely has a little bit of inbuilt variance for sure, more so than I think any other Guardian.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But when you do win your clashes, it feels super unfair. So
Yeah.
the funniest clash against Sean was I was out of gold and I block with a Clash of Might, and I flip over Clash of Might, which is a 4 power, which is usually pretty good against Syndra. And then he flips over Ravenous Rabble, so then he got a Might token.
Yeah, Rebel, a fake 5 power, never really attacks for 5. It can, but pretty uncommonly.
Yeah, it was. So yeah, Sean top aided the Can Nats this year, and I think I feel very responsible for at least giving him that win. Where the matchup says I should win, and I played against 2 more Syndras on the same day, and the games weren't close, and it was only Sean that the game wasn't close, but the other way around where he just completely demolished me. So yeah, CC Victor, great.
Yeah, and I guess quick shout out. Lots of people did well at Can Nats, but 2 of our locals, Dong Hee Kim and Lucas Ng, made top 8. They met in semifinals, with Lucas winning the semis and then going on to lose to Syndra in the finals. They were both playing Gravy Bones, had a very long Gravy Bones mirror, and then Lucas paired into his Nightmare matchup Syndra in the finals. So yeah, shout out to them, awesome showing, and shout out to everyone else who did well at Canadian Nationals.
One thing I want to say about that game, it was I think it was maybe it was Jazzica I was talking to, but we're just like, oh man, this Gravy Mirror Donghi versus Lucas is basically it's a 2-hour game to decide who gets to lose to Syndra's in the finals, because Syndra was locked the finals before the game even started.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was so funny. It's just like, oh man, they're playing this grueling 2-hour game of Gravy Mirror, and then it's just like it's so doomed for whoever wins this game.
Yeah, definitely pretty funny. So yeah, that was the weekend.
Okay, so we'll move on to the Marlin cards. So we'll quickly talk about the commons and the rares and their block values as always. The Ranger has 18 commons and 9 rares. So Ranger's common block really well in the set. 15 of them are 3 blocks, mostly arrows, and 3 of them are 2 blocks, which are the pumps. And in the 9 rares, there's 6 3 blocks, which are still the arrows, and the 3 2 blocks, which are the other pumps. Ranger cards block really well, at least compared to the mech cards that we talked about last week.
Yeah, I think Marlin has the biggest density of 3 blocks, and this kind of plays into at least the canon Marlin deck being able to play kind of like a Guardian, like the defensive, big attack, play a long game kind of deck. And you kind of see this in the 3 block density of the class.
And I guess we can also talk about quickly about the pirate and the generics. Like last time, 27 commons in the pirate cards. We have 4 3 blocks, 23 2 blocks, 18 rares, 13 3 blocks, 3 2 blocks, and 2 null blocks, which is the skirts back and the weird prevention card. As always, pirate cards. Pirate rares block really well. Pirate commons block kind of awful. And the generics, 28 commons, we have 23 2 blocks, and the rest, weird number of blocks, 2.5 or better. Usually the block cards and rally the rear guards. And we have 18 rares and generics. We have 2 3 blocks, 11 2 blocks, and 3 Fiddler's Green, and 2 no blocks. So, as always, the generics and the pirates don't block well, but the ranger cards really do block well in at least for this class. This means that like if you draft too many generics or pirate cards, you can end up in a Marylnn deck that also just doesn't block, right?
Yeah, generally the generic and pirate heavy decks don't block super well, and then you get a lot of that block value from the class cards. It's pretty typical in this set, and this is no exception. But I do think that Marylnn sort of has the best ability to get a high 3 block density of all the heroes.
Mm-hmm. Do you think? Are you like currently like picking up 3 blocks, like class card 3 blocks, like a little bit higher than some of the generics or the pirate cards?
It depends a lot on my deck, and it depends a lot on the pirate and generic cards. I think there's some really powerful 2 blocks in the set, like Golden Tipple, Swift Water Sloop, Scar for a Scar, Red Chart. There's quite a few 2 blocks that I'm pretty happy to pick, and I think are pretty high picks in general. I do think you need to prioritize 3 blocks when and where you can, especially blue 3 blocks are super, super premium because most decks like to run a high blue count if they can. And we kind of talked about this last week, but having good blue quality lets you run higher blue counts and lets you have a more consistent deck. So it feels like by picking those blues early, you can get a higher blue count, and that's just like kind of your reward. That higher consistency is your reward for picking those blues. So I do think that you need to really prioritize blue 3 blocks, but there's a lot of very powerful 2 blocks as well in the set.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about cards like maybe like the Expedition Cycle, like the 3 for 7, the 2 block that when you attack you put a gold count on it? Do you like these cards in Marylnn right now?
I think in the cannon build you do want some of these, but in general the 3 for 7s, I see people pick these really highly sometimes, and I'm honestly pretty low on these cards. I feel like most decks want like 1 or 2 of these, and that's kind of it, because if you draw multiples, you just like you kind of can't do anything with them. Like they're red, they block you, they don't really pitch, like, but you really want to play them. So I like having a couple of these, but I think you can get overloaded pretty fast. And yeah, the 3 for 7s I'm like a little bit low on. I think Walk the Plank is like a really premium one, the one that taps an ally or hero when it hits because it disrupts. But I think that the Expedition to Horizon's Mantle, the 3 for 7 treasure counter one that you're talking about, is kind of, it's not a, I don't want to say it's a bad card, but like I don't think it's necessarily a high pick because you just like don't want that many total 3 for 7s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like this card is actually not in my overrated section, but it feels like this card is starting to be like overrated in the format as a whole.
Yeah, I think that the very like early level 1 of this format is like, oh, it's heavy hitters. You draft 3 blocks and 3 for 7s, and that's like true to a point. But I think that there's enough power in the set that you can do some really busted stuff. And honestly, in a lot of my stronger decks, if my opponent's just sitting there and their plan is to play like a 3 for 7 every turn, I'm just like, oh, this is so great. I can sit here and block 2 cards and trade with you, and then just be like, okay, take 7, here's 20, or like here's 18, and they're just like, uh-oh, because like it just feels like if all they're doing is sending 7, you're not really able to pressure their life total in a meaningful enough way for it to like actually threaten them, is kind of what it feels like. And then they'll just get to their like gold end game, or I don't know, go again attacks with their sloops, or giant overpower arrow as Marylnn, or Puffin's gonna like draw a card and send a Cogwork Zeppelin for 14. Like there's just like so many stupid things that can happen in this format when given enough time to set up, that like if all you're doing is throwing 7s, it's kind of like, okay, sure.
Yeah, I feel like this format has just like a lot of explosive power, and once the gold starts running, then they just a lot of the decks can like utilize and convert the gold to actual points of value, and there's a lot of gold that ends up coming up on the board. So some of these turns can go upwards of like 20 points off of five cards, like 21 points off of five cards, and some of the most ridiculous decks I've seen like 22 damage turns. So yeah, it you can definitely get blown out for kind of no reason in this format.
Yeah, and I think a notable thing about the format is usually it does involve gold, multiple usually, to have those really big turns. So it does feel like you have to kind of like build up or like earn those turns. Yeah, I think decks both want ways to play the early game as well as ways to transition into something powerful in the end game, and you kind of want both of those aspects. And the 3 for 7s are really good in the early game. They're one of the better things you can do on like a 2 card hand outside of like having a scarf or a scar and some or something in your hand, but those are pretty premium. Yeah, they don't scale into the late game, and for that reason, I think you don't want too many of them.
Okay, then let's move on and talk about Marlynn's equipment suites and what we want to play for Marlin. And I guess the most obvious one is Glide Wilfins. This is the arm piece that blocks for one. It has Battle Sworn, and it has the ability pay one, destroy it, and put an arrow from your hand face up in your arsenal. It gets +1 power this turn. This card is kind of insane.
Yeah, so much like we talked about how Puffin's equipment are kind of worth 2 points because you get like the block and the activation, and Marlin's gloves are kind of the last piece of equipment in the set that also do this. They're worth 2 points, one on defense, and then you get the +1 on the arrow at some point. It does cost you a resource, but usually you can find somewhere where you have an extra resource to convert that. And then you also get the load effect, which can be really important for letting you play multiple arrows, or if you're the cannon deck, sometimes you have trouble loading, and this can be your way to load. So yeah, Glidewell Fins I think is one of the best Marlin cards just in general, and a pretty high pick. I think very 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 good glove slot.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the most important part about this card is that it loads, right? Like loading for free is or for one cost is so important on this card.
Yeah, I agree. It's a huge consistency piece. It lets you, if you have something like a Swift Shot or a Sikkim Shot, it can let you do some very powerful turns involving multiple arrows, and it blocks for one while still letting you do that. It's not even like you have to choose; you just get to do both. So yeah, Glidewell Fins is really impressive.
Yeah, just don't put yourself in a really awkward spot where you haven't blocked with it yet and you have to use it. I would I would think about blocking with this card early rather than later.
Yeah, agreed with that. Yeah, this should usually be your first equipment that you block with. That doesn't mean that you have to like rush to block with it turn zero, but as soon as there's a spot where it's like they throw a 3 for 7, you block 2 cards in equipment, this should be the equipment that you put out there.
Yeah, I've definitely been in a spot where I like save the equipment and I go like, I want to pop this. I haven't blocked with it. What do I do?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, on to the other ranger equipment. Patch the hole. This is the headpiece. It doesn't block, and it has an instant where you can pick up your arsenal and put it in your hand. That's it. On its face, this is kind of like zero value, and this card doesn't look very good. The more that I play with this card, the more I'm extremely impressed with it. I think because of gold and certain Marlin decks wanting to draw random cards and potentially arsenal them. Like, for example, you have a headshot in your hand and you want to crack a gold to load the headshot, spend the one resource to fire the headshot, and then you have this extra card. And like if you draw a pump, you can just play the pump and that's great. But a lot of times you're going to draw this extra card. And if it's something with go again, that's fine. But there's a lot of cards you don't want to arsenal in Marlin. Some of them even good ones, like maybe you draw a swift shot and you don't have an extra load on the turn. That swift shot in arsenal is not very good. It's just a 0 for 4 arrow that kind of clogs your arsenal. And having patch the hole essentially lets you take these lines where you take these, like I'm going to call them ponders, these draw card effects that you're not really able to use on that turn, and you just kind of free roll them. If it's a go again attack, you can put in arsenal. You don't have to use patch the hole. And then if it's something clunky like a swift shot or even just like a blue block 3 that doesn't really have an effect, you can put that in your arsenal, pick it up, and you just go up a card where you can either block 3 with it, use it as a blue, whatever. It gives you a ton of flexibility. And I found that patch the hole very often converts to a full card worth of value for me.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. I think it's kind of accurate to what I feel with this card as well. And it just like unclogs your hand in such a meaningful way. I feel like this card got like it got compared to, that's the word. It got compared to Bunker Beard, and it is just not the same as Bunker Beard, right? Like this card is just so much better than that.
Yeah, I've been very impressed with Patch the Hole. I do think certain decks want it more than others. I think like the more that your deck is gonna play in ways where you're drawing cards and you don't know if you can use those cards, you have like multiple golden tipples, you're playing Swindler's Grift, you're playing headshots, and you're usually going to be doing gold into headshot. All those types of lines makes you want Patch the Hole more. And if your deck is one that's really not drawing very many cards, Patch the Hole is still pretty good because you have gold and you can always draw cards and still take those lines. You know, Blade Break 1 is still very powerful, and so yeah, I think not all Marlin decks want this equally for is what I would say. There's some decks where I feel like this is just like absolutely the card I want. I want it like as much as I want Glidewell Fins, honestly, in some decks. And then there's other decks where I'm just like, I'm pretty happy with like a block one headpiece.
That makes sense. The card that pairs really well with Patch the Hole in this set would be a Majestic Return Fire. I feel like if you have Return Fire, you just need Patch the Hole. And
Yeah.
if you just have both of these together, you can just do kind of really insane things. Return Fire is the Majestic. That's a block card, Ranger block card, and this is when it defends. You may banish an arrow from your hand. If you do at the start of your next turn, put a face up into your arsenal. It gets +3 power until end of turn. Because this is a start of turn trigger, there's like no way they can clear your arsenal if you already have one after you block with return fire. So you need to have a clear arsenal, basically at the end of your opponent's turn. And the best way or the only way to do that is patch the hole in this set. So if you have patch the hole, if you have return fire, you really, really need patch the hole, because or else you can put yourself in a spot where return fire is just a bad on the horizon, and you don't want that to happen.
Yeah, always a good card, but yes, you really want the +3 out of it. Something else that I had an opponent do to me once that I thought was really sweet was they made a Goldfin Harpoon and arsenal it at their end of the turn, which is like something Marlin does kind of often. But it was a spot where I'm like, that's kind of interesting. I don't know if I would do that here. And then on their next hand, they activated Patch the Hole, block with Rally the rearguard, and discarded their Goldfin Harpoon. I was like, they just got 3 block out of their Goldfin Harpoon. Like, that's kind of awesome.
Yeah, that is kind of awesome. Yeah, that's kind of sick. Wow.
Yeah. So Patch the Hole has a lot of like cool use cases that are. If you are not very high on this card, I'd recommend playing with it. I think you'll be impressed and surprised at how powerful it can be.
I guess moving on, the other headpiece that Marlon wants to play will be Blue Sea Tricord. There actually isn't that many blocking headpieces in this set. It's just Blue Sea Tricorn and Hellsman's Peak. And I think the one that you want more is Blue Sea's Tricorn because it has the ability of paying 3, destroying it, and drawing a card. And Marlon's ability after you draw a card, you get the load for free. So Blue Sea Tricorn is kind of like your get out of your jail free when you don't have a gold. So this card is very good in Marlin.
Yeah, I think especially the Harpoon Marlin deck. The Manta Marlin has a little trouble activating this because you're often like lower on blue count, and you also just like have access to loads with your bow, so you're not that likely to want this. But having a second like much worse Glidewell Fins is pretty good for Cannon.
Mm-hmm. And well, even in the Manta deck, you still want a blocking headpiece.
Yeah, it's still a Blade Break 1, but the activated ability is kind of whatever in Manta.
Yeah. I think even in the Cannon deck, you don't want to activate it if you don't need to, but it's more of like your get out of jail free card.
Yeah. When it fixes your hand that does nothing into a hand that does something, it's very, very good. But most of the time you would prefer to block with this and not be in the spot where you have to activate this. Agreed with that. Yeah.
And then I guess talking about the Tricorn, you can play any of the other Blade Break, and they all have small, mediocre effects. I feel like they can be relevant. They aren't usually relevant. So you just play whatever you can get. And I guess the chess piece of choice would be Buccaneer's Bounty. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think Buccaneer's Bounty is easily the best one. Marlin likes tapping her hero ability, or likes tapping to use her hero ability. So Old Knocker has a real cost, and Buccaneer's Bounty is easily the best one, which, I mean, surprise, it's the best one for all of them. What I'd say is, I think in Canon Marlin, Captain's Coat is slightly better because you'll often draw a card and have a blue density where you can sort of just like make Captain's Coat work. And then I think in Manta Marlin, you would much rather have Old Knocker than Captain's Coat, because Old Knocker lets you play one costs that you otherwise wouldn't. So sometimes you have this hand where you have like a bunch of pumps and a headshot, and you're like, I don't really want to pitch a whole card for this headshot, but I also like, I'm not going to draw a card because like I don't really have resources, and it fixes those like all red hands with a one cost. Whereas the Captain's Coat really doesn't help you in those spots. And I think for the Cannon Marlin deck, the Captain's Coat is kind of nicer because often you're wanting to make the Goldfin Harpoon later in the game so that you can like, that can be your arrow to dominate or whatever, and the tap is actually pretty costly on Old Knocker. So yeah, I think basically Old Knocker for Manta, Captain's Coat for Cannon, and Buccaneer's Bounty is just the best of the bunch for both of them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Captain's Code is one of those cards I want to talk about because this card is really bad in like all the other heroes, right?
I've liked it okay in Gravy. I don't really like it in Puffin though. But yeah, Captain's Code is sort of like hit and miss, and you really need to understand your deck to understand if it's good or not. In Gravy, it's pretty solid because if you loot with Gravy, you can always turn on Captain's Code, so it's like fairly reliable. Um, but yeah, in Puffin, it's really awkward, and in the Manta deck, it's you can usually get value out of it, but you would much rather have Old Knocker.
Yeah, that makes sense. Then I guess what about the Nimblism package, like the quick clicks and swift strikes? Do you like those in Marlin?
I think they're really, really, really good in Manta Marlin because all your arrows cost 1 or 0, and you're playing mostly like 0 cost go agains or 1 cost go again generics. You don't play many big attacks. So, yes, super good there. It's like maybe the best home. Puffin's also a really good home for it, but I think Manta Marlin and Puffin are the best homes for the Nimblism equipment. But if you are Cannon Marlin, it's pretty awkward. You probably don't want to play that many red arrows because you don't have a way to load them and it can contribute to bricks. You're playing some big attacks. Those don't work with Nimblism. So I think you actively don't want this in Cannon, and you actively do want it in Manta.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Swift Strike Bracers is just so insane, and honestly, if you can, whenever any deck that can like utilize Nimblism reasonably well, you just want like Bracers, Nimblism. Oh, so much damage.
Yeah, agreed. One thing I will say too is like in Cannon Marlin, we talked about how important those Glidewell fins are, and you're like giving up Glidewell fins for Swiss Strike Bracers. So it's like even more reason why, like because of the competition in the glove slot, it's like even more costly. Whereas I think there's like Manta Marlin decks where like you do really want Glidewell fins, but there's also ones where it's just like, I'm pretty happy to have Swiss Strike Bracers and just get the +2, and that's like pretty sweet.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's like being needing to pay a resource just to load is like so expensive if you're not playing that many blues.
Yeah, exactly. The Glidewell fins are still fantastic. Don't get me wrong, but you're more willing to give them up, whereas the Cannon deck is like, man, you need the load. You really need the load.
I think a good way of thinking about it is like Swift Strike Bracers is an equipment piece that converts for 2 points of value, and Glide Fins I think is almost closer to like 1.5 because you need to like use the resource to get the +1. So Swift Strike might be worth like a half a point more in some scenarios. So I think that might be like a good way to like visualize this
Mm-hmm.
comparison.
Yeah, agreed with that. So yeah, that's the equipment in Marlin. Let's go into the key cards. For key cards, we've kind of broken it down into a couple categories. We'll do key cards in both decks first, and then we'll talk about Cannon and Manta specifically because you're probably getting this picture already, but they want pretty different cards and they play very differently from each other.
Do you want to start off with the pumps then?
Yeah, so the pumps that are good in both is the rare drop the anchor. It gives your next arrow +3, and when it hits, tap the opposing hero and all allies they control. This is just such a good piece of disruption in addition to being a pump. Honestly, drop the anchor is kind of gross. Like you just like send a giant arrow. Maybe it has overpower, maybe it doesn't. If it's Puffin, it shuts down their turn. If they're wanting to do like an overpower arrow as Marlin or a golden tipple line, it shuts that down. If they're Gravy Bones and they have some allies and they're kind of low on life, but you're not quite in kill range yet, you can just drop the anchor, tap down their board, get them low and they can't utilize their board, and then try to kill them on the next turn. So I've been like super impressed with this card.
Yeah, drop the anchor. Giving an on hit's really real, and it's like so like usually Ranger has some on hits on their arrows, at least like historically, but Marlin really doesn't have on hits, at least out there at the common level. So just giving these like really powerful one cost attacks an on hit is so real.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. So yeah, drop the anchor, super super good. And then the other pump that you really want is call in the big guns, especially at red. The yellows and blues are a lot less good, but this is the +3, and you can put an arrow from your hand into your arsenal face up. Extra load, triggers all the arrow face up effects, is a +3 pump with Go Again. We talked about Go Again being premium. Call in the big guns kind of does everything you want. In in Cannon, this gives you a way to load that you otherwise might not have access to. So that's really fantastic. And then in the Red Spine Manta deck, where you are wanting Go Again arrows like Sikkim Shot and Swift Shot, you can load a Sikkim Shot or load a Swift Shot, give it Go Again, come in for 7, Go Again, then Red Spine Manta, Dry Powder Shot for 5, something like this. So the double load is super valuable there. It's kind of funny. There's like a rare fire in the hole that lets you untap a bow and gives +3. And in Red Spine, it's like almost the same card, but it's actually worse because when you arsenal fire in the hole, it doesn't help you load an additional time. So it's kind of funny that even though it's a rare, call in the big guns is actually just better.
That's actually so funny. I guess yeah, you're right.
It's not much like fire in the hole is not much worse than call in the big guns in Red Spine, but it's like a lot worse in Cannon, and then it's still slightly worse in Red Spine, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, I agree with that. Fire in the Holes has some like weird applications here and there, but yeah, I call in the big guns is just so much more consistent.
So outside of these pumps, there's the generic Charter Course Red, which is really solid. This is just a +3 to your first attack. You can put a treasure counter on, which when you're doing big damage is pretty nice. And in Cannon Marlin, this is really good because it works on both halves of your deck. It works on the arrows, but it also works on the big attacks, which is kind of huge because sometimes you have this problem where you like don't want too many arrow specific pumps because you don't want that many arrows in your deck in total. And this kind of smooths that out. And then you just want pumps in Manta Marlin, so this card's pretty good. And in Manta Marlin, you can even play the yellow, honestly, because you have so much Go Again. The yellow is like not as good as the red, but it's not that much worse.
That makes sense. Well, it still pumps 3 power in Yellow Charter Course.
Yeah, and as a resource card, it's just like really good in Manta Marlin. I think like you like actively want the card in your deck.
Fair enough, fair enough. Then talking about the other generics, I want to talk about Golden Tipple. This card's like the best home in Marlin, at least at draft, right?
Yeah, if you have a lot of allies, Golden Tipple's good in gravy, but in Marlin, because of your hero ability making the Goldfin Harpoon, which is a yellow, this is just free and always online so long as you have a gold. And when Golden Tipple is 3 Go Again, draw a card, replace the gold, you get a load. It's just it kind of feels like cheating. Even the yellow is good too at 2 Go Again. It's like a little less premium, but still good. The blue one's kind of whatever. The blue one's a gravy card because it's a starter. But yeah, red Golden Tipple is crazy in Marlin. Super good.
Yeah, it's so like all the unfair turns that Marlin gets to do usually starts with a Golden Tipple. Yeah, like when you can actually turn a fake card into a real card, you're doing something unfair. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of when Zen used to make Crouching Tigers and banishing it off Art of War.
Yeah, it's very much the same kind of vibe. So yeah, Golden Tipple is a house. It's good in all the Marlin decks, and it's good in gravy too. Yeah, Golden Tipple is super good. One of the strongest cards in the set, I think.
Then what about the arrows? Like, which arrows do all the decks want? At least all the Marlin decks want.
Yeah, I think the big ones are Swift Shot and Sikkim Shot. Swift Shot on paper is clearly better. Like it's a 0 for 4 with Go Again, whereas Sikkim Shot is a 1 for 4 with Go Again. But it's a little bit closer than that because Sikkim Shot has the Go Again regardless. So if you arsenal a Sikkim Shot, it will have Go Again. Whereas if you arsenal a Swift Shot, it won't have Go Again. And this can be a pretty big difference maker, but one cost is also pretty big. So I think the edge goes to Swift Shot. It is the better arrow, but maybe not by quite as much as it would appear just by looking at like the rate on the cards. The unconditional Go Again on Sikkim Shot is also very good. And honestly, both these cards are premium. Even yellow and blue Sikkim Shot are like so reasonable. Like when I had I had a Marlin deck where I think I had like 3 blue Sikkim shots. I'm just like, ah, oh, those are 3 cards. Those are 3 blues that I can ponder and just stick in my arsenal and go 2 go again and just not have to worry about it. Whereas like most of the other stuff is like you get like a blue headshot and it's doomed. You have to patch the hole.
Yeah, I think Sikkim Shot. We're gonna talk about this in the underrated section, but I think is an underrated card. I feel like all colors of this card is reasonable, and they go a little bit too late right now.
I guess after these 2 arrows, I'll give honorable mentions just to headshot and dry powder shot as like 0 for 5 and 1 for 6 if you can load them face up. They can be a little bit clunky when these line up. They're really, really powerful. And dry powder shot in particular with calling the big guns, that's a 2 card 8. You go calling the big guns, dry powder shot, come in for 8, and that's just like a really solid turn. So those arrows are also good, but maybe they're not nearly as premium as the go again ones. And not all Marlin decks actively want like lots of these headshots and dry powder shots.
Yeah, I don't think they actively want a bunch of them, but they kind of actively want like the first copy.
Yeah, yeah. And I think Manta Marlin's happy to play multiples.
Yeah, that makes sense. Then, do you want to talk about the cards that are good in either Cannon or Manta? Which deck do you want to start with first?
Let's do Cannon. I think that's the one that a lot of people are familiar with. So the cool thing about Cannon, Marlin, is this deck kind of asks almost nothing of you. You can kind of put whatever you want into it. It's like a bit of a good stuff deck. You can play go again attacks if you have them. If you don't, no problem. The biggest thing you want is some big attacks because of the difficulties loading. You want ways to fill in those turns. So 3 for 7s are good, stuff like that. Just play big numbers. You have a bunch of 3 blocks and block really well. Play this kind of gold denial strategy. And then you want cards like the blue harpoons. Redfin and bluefin harpoon in particular are kind of like bombs in this deck. And you want some number of pumps. And you basically have this gameplay loop of block really well, send big attacks. Once they get low, you can use the goldfin harpoon and the pumps to close out the game. That's like kind of the game plan for a cannon. And having a couple pumps really increases your kill range, which can be good because we talked about how powerful some of the end games are, and you can kind of like give your opponent less time to do that end game.
And having some sort of disruption is really strong, and this usually comes in the form of like the Redfin Harpoon and the Bluefin Harpoon. But when one of these gets activated with the Hammerhead Cannon, it's a beating, right? Like 8 overpowered on hit kill a red is so good.
Yeah. One thing I will say about these harpoons is to be a little bit careful, especially when your opponent still has armor up, because if they have like an on the horizon, or even like, especially if the rally the rear guard covers it, like they have 3 points of armor and a rally the rear guard, if you put in the resources to like pitch 2 blues and play the harpoon and you do a 3 card 8, that's not very good. You need the on hit to make that a good play. And so these are powerful cards and very good plays, but they're good when the armor is depleted.
Yeah, you really do want to play a pump with it if possible. But when it hits, oh man, it kills their turn.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the cannon deck. Honestly, it's just super flexible. I think just having Treasure Island and the Goldfin Harpoon and the ability to give it +4 and overpower as like a 6 power overpower weapon that you can just repeatedly use in the end game just means like cannon is just like really solid and really doesn't need much to function. Manta is a lot more particular. So the key to drafting the Manta deck is you want lots of go again attacks, combination of attacks and arrows. So basically any attack with go again on it is good in this deck. So your Sikkim shots, your swift shots, your life for a life, scar for a scar, ravenous rabble, anything with go again is great. And in line with that, you really want pumps. Calling the big guns is probably amongst the best one, but you probably want like 6+ pumps because this is another way to get go again in the set. And you don't super care about what you have. Like Nimblism's good, chart's good, yellow chart's good. You have quite a few ways to get these pumps, but it's a way to help you convert your hands on offense in Manta. So that's kind of what Manta's looking for. Lots of go again.
That makes a lot of sense. I feel like there isn't that much to say about Manta because like that's a deck where you're just like trying to send 14, 15 every single turn if possible.
Yeah. We'll talk about it a little bit more in the deck outlines to give you a better idea of exactly like how Manta and how Cannon can look. But in terms of key cards, it's mostly just go against. That's what lets you play Manta, and then Cannon wants big attacks and 3 blocks and some harpoons, and that's what lets you play cannon.
Then let's talk about the overrated cards and the underrated cards next. I have one overrated card. I think this card gets drafted too highly. It's Monkey Powder. I have no idea how to use this card. Maybe I'm missing something, but this card's bad, right? Or at least from my experience, this card seems awful.
Yeah, I think the +1 and overpower, even though you get the draw card, is just like a little bit too awkward, and it costs 3. I have very rarely seen a very big overpower attack with Monkey Powder, but that's not the norm for this card, and I think overall it's just a little too unreliable and too below rate to be all that good. I agree. Even though this is a rare, it's yeah, just not even close to premium.
I feel like I just like want to activate my hammerhead or like my weapon over this card almost every time.
Yeah, yeah, it's just not very efficient. Even though it like replaces itself, 3 cost for +1 and overpower is just too much.
Mhm.
Because it's still a 2 card play. So even if it's a 1 card for +1 and overpower, that's like not great. And then the card that you're getting back as a draw card is an unknown. It does help you load, I suppose, but yeah, I have not been impressed with Monkey Powder.
Yeah, it's more clunky and awkward in so many hands. I'm just like looking at this Monkey Powder. I'm like, I can't play it. I need the blue for something else. Yeah, block for 2. It's like, oh no, I don't want to be blocking for 2 in this format.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty bad. Yeah, so Monkey Powder bit overrated, and then underrated cards. Sikkim Shot. I think we've kind of sung the praises of this card, but the unconditional go again so good. The yellow clears almost every ally that you care about, and the blue is a blue that you can arsenal. It blocks 3. Sikkim Shot's great. Honestly, I'm very happy having this card in every color. The red's like premium, and then the yellows and blues are like solid.
Yeah, well, blue 3 block.
Yeah, blue 3 block. How's go again? You kill a rigor mortis with this. It's great.
And I see a Patch the Hole in here as well. I think we also talked about this card a bunch, but it is definitely underrated, right? At least from like the general community.
I get this card with like 2 cards left in the pack sometimes, and I'm like, oh, this is so good. I'm kind of sad that maybe after this episode that might not happen as much, but yeah, this card is a bit underrated for sure. Not every Marylnn deck wants it. There's decks where I'd rather have Blade Break 1, but in the right deck, man, is it powerful.
So good, so good. There's so many of like the most ridiculous plays in Marlin always comes from Patch the Hole, and it's just like this card just goes up and up and up in value for me.
Yeah, every time I'm like, this card's like, at first I was like, this card's unplayable. Then I'm like, this card's not bad. It has some use cases. And I'm like, this card's pretty good. And now I'm just like, I just want this card. It's so good. Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's really a card that doesn't read strong, but within the context of the set is very powerful.
It's like ragamuffins, whatever. That card was bad in draft, but it's so good and constructed.
Yeah, it's kind of like Honing Hood, which was like a very good card in Lexi, but Honing Hood lets you like put the card face down in your arsenal. Then you could like flip it with Lexi, and it's just like you read this and you're like, oh, it's worse Honing Hood because it doesn't let you load something. But like within the context of the set, it might actually just be like better than Honing Hood. Like I think Honing Hood is better in Tails. This is better in High Seas, which is like not intuitive when you first read the card. So it makes sense that it's underrated, but yeah. Anyways, let's go on to our deck outlines. First one, we'll start with Cannon Marylnn. You want lots of blues in this deck, 10 to 14 blues, lots of 3 blocks. Ideally, blues that do something. So like blue barks, mutinies, stuff like this are really premium because you want to avoid the all blue hands that just like don't do anything. Once you have gold, the nice thing is that you can always, make a goldfin harpoon, pitch a blue, crack a gold, load, pitch another blue, activate your cannon, come in for 6. So you always have that as a floor once you have gold. But yeah, as always, good blue quality lets you play more blues.
Yeah, nothing to say there.
In addition to this, you want some big red attacks to fill in your turns. You want lots of 3 blocks. If you can get go again attacks, they are still good here. They let you push bigger turns. Pressure is good. We've talked about this a bunch. It also lets you clear allies, which is something that Marylnn can kind of struggle with, especially in the cannon decks. So having some access to go agains is very, very good. And then after that, you can play some red arrows. I've had cannon decks that play none. I would say that you kind of want like, as a baseline, 0 to 4 red arrows. They do block for 3, which is kind of nice, but you don't want too many because you can't load them and you can draw these red arrow hands that don't do anything. And then as you add in call in the big guns, you can increase your arrow account roughly like 1 to 1. So I would say like if you have like one call in the big guns, I'd play like up to 5 red arrows, and if I have two call in the big guns, I play up to 6 red arrows, and you kind of want them like hand in hand. Like you don't want like two call in the big guns and no red arrows, because then these call in the big guns like often won't have a target, and like that kind of sucks too. So you kind of want like roughly like equal number of red arrow to call in the big guns plus 3 on the red arrow side. So like 1 and 4, 2 and 5, 3 and 6, and probably not too much above that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think the biggest reason you want to be playing the red arrows would be that it blocks for three, and you don't want to like dilute your three block density. So if you are gonna be playing, like thinking about like which red arrows to play, I don't think it matters too much which ones you play as long as they block for three, and they are gonna block for three. So I would pick the red arrows more so for the three block than the actual like the power on the card.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's of course the hierarchy, like the go again arrows are the best, dry powder and headshot are probably after that, and then the rest are beneath that. But yeah, the difference between scouting shot and dry powder shot or netting shot is just not that big in the cannon deck, especially because you just don't attack with these arrows all that often. So yeah, not a huge difference there. And then the last note that I want to mention is just Chart a Course is really good in this deck because it's a pump that works on both sides of the deck and kind of lets you play a higher pump count, which you want to be able to kill people without some of the inconsistencies. Because I think one of the problems you can run into with this deck is having too many arrow specific pumps with not enough arrows, or even just having a bunch. Like if you have like a lot of arrow pumps and a lot of arrows, like suddenly you start having these hands where you like draw arrow pumps with no arrows, you draw arrows with no way to load it. You introduce a lot of consistency. So I would say that you don't want more than like maybe like 5 to 6 arrows max and like a few pumps. But Chart a Course kind of lets you cheat this because it just works on anything. If you draw Chart a Course and an expedition, you can just be like, okay, Chart a Course expedition for 10, and that's just like a solid turn.
It's a really good turn
Yeah, it's
actually.
a really good turn. Yeah. Charter Course is like so good in Marylnn, honestly, just because it works on both halves of the deck. I think it might be like it's like comparable to Calling the Big Guns. Calling the Big Guns has a load, which is like a lot of utility, but working on both halves in canon is like actually huge.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, the red one's gonna go fast in the draft, so you have to kind of pick it highly too.
And the other thing about this card in Marlin is I find that you can get an extra gold. This is often +3 and a gold because you either put it on a harpoon and you know that it has overpower and they probably can't block it, or you're playing like the Manto Marlin deck and you're just like, I'm doing 15 damage this turn. They can't block it. Like I'm just gonna get 2 gold out of this. Well, not like 1 gold out of this card, but also one from the Treasure Island, and just going up on the gold is really strong.
Yeah, 2 gold is worth so much in Marlin. Yeah, you need multiples of 2 gold in Marlin, and Chart of Course making 2 gold is so good.
So I think that's it for canon. Onto the Manta Marlin. There's kind of two styles of Manta. You can either be a very red line version or a version that plays more blues and yellows. We'll start with the red line version because I think it's kind of the most pure. This deck can play between 0 and 5 blues. Usually it's pretty hard to play 0, but maybe you can get there. Ideally, you want your blues to block 3. I think Sikkim Shot's probably the best one. Yellows can also fill in your resource cards and let you play a couple like tipples, Sikkim Shots, headshots. You probably have a couple 1 costs, but if you're on the red line deck, you really want almost all zeros because you don't want to be pitching very often. And that's kind of the key to playing this low blue count red line deck is lots of zeros. That means you want like at least 3 swift shots, multiple call in the big guns for multi-arrow turns, lots of pumps that are all zeros. Ravenous Rabble is fantastic here, and other zero cost arrows. You can go like Swift Shot plus a pump into like a Dry Powder Shot is like a bread and butter play for this Manta Marlin deck. And that's kind of the idea. You're just playing like a Cheerio style aggro deck. Occasionally you can pitch a yellow to play like a tipple plus headshot style turn, and that's kind of like the curve of this deck. And then in this deck, Buccaneer's Bounty is super, super good to give you the 1 cost to play. Like if you have your 1 headshot, so you don't have to pitch a whole card to it. And Old Knocker is also a pretty good replacement for that. Captain's Coat is not so good here because usually when you want the resource is because you don't have a blue, and then you can't really draw a card to get the resource from Captain's Coat. So Captain's Coat is better than nothing, but it's a lot worse than Old Knocker here.
That makes a lot of sense. So this is a deck where it has to be kind of open, right? This lane has to be open for you to get into here.
Yeah, the red line especially, you really need the density of Cheerios cards. And what I would say is I'll often know if I'm a Manta deck kind of early because I'm getting enough go against, but I won't know if I'm the red line or the blue line until kind of like pack 2, pack 3, and it will depend on how many zeros versus how many one costs I have, because the one costs are what lead you to a higher blue count so that you can resolve your cards.
That makes sense. Then, do you want to talk about the blue Manta Marlin deck?
Yeah, so the blue Manta Marlin deck will play something more like 6 to 8 blues. Again, ideally block threes, stuff you can play out of Arsenal as premium. Mutinies are good here. And then you can want like 13 ish total resource cards. So again, yellows really help you pay for stuff. The blue Manta Marlin deck's characterized by having lots of one cost go agains. So you can play a few of these in the red line deck, but if you start having a high density of these, so these are like Golden Tipples, Life for a Life, Gold Hunter Light Sail, Sikkim Shot, those type of cards, if you have lots of these, you really actually want to have a higher blue count so that you can resolve these cards. And then to pair with these one cost go agains, you can do things like one cost arrows more easily. So like Headshot goes up in value in this a lot. You pitch a yellow, one cost go again into headshots, really solid. Or you pitch a blue and you go into a 2 cost. Shout out to Sirens of Safe Harbor as just a really good 2 cost. You go, I don't know, Sikkim Shot 4, go again, Sirens for 6, gain a life. That's a 3 card 11, super solid. And I think this is actually the home for Swindler's Grift. That's the 2 for 6 that has the same text as Golden Tipple. You can discard a yellow, get a gold, draw a card. Basically, the idea here is you can activate Marylnn, get a Goldfin Harpoon, do a 1 for 4 go again into a Swindler's Grift for 6, discard the Goldfin Harpoon, draw a new card, replace the gold. And you've basically done a 3 card 10 draw card. And the trick here is if you're playing this, you really, really want Patch the Hole so that you can arsenal the card that you draw safely, even if it's not a playable card, which sometimes it won't be. Having the higher red and yellow density does mean that you're more likely to draw a playable card, but you still might not. So you really want Patch the Hole for this, and you don't need to pick Swindler's Grifts aggressively. They go pretty late, but this is like a good home for that card as a card you get late.
That makes a lot of sense. This might be the only home for Swindler's Grift.
I kind of think so. I think that card's like largely pretty unplayable, and even in this deck, I want like a couple 2 costs, like one Swindler's, one Siren's Calls, like kind of pretty solid. I don't want like a bunch of these because they still have the 2 block problem and the 2 block red problem that we were talking about, where you can get like flooded on them. You really don't want multiples of these, but having 1 or 2 to fill in your curves pretty good. Or you can just have a ton of 1 costs, and that actually works as well. I've had decks that just play like 1 cost go again, 1 cost go again, headshot, and like that's also perfectly reasonable. So you can kind of go either way on this like more blue heavy deck. The blue and red is like close enough together where you just like want lots of pumps, lots of go agains, that really you can kind of decide to draft more blues as you get more 1 costs, or don't draft blues and keep drafting zeros, and it's pretty flexible.
I guess one note for the Swindler's Grift again would be if you don't have Patch the Hole, you probably don't want this card, right?
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah, like don't play Swindler's Grift and be like Yuki told me this was good, and then not have Patch the Hole to unbrick yourself when you draw like the blue unplayable arrow.
Yeah, I think the blue Manta Marlin deck ends up pondering a lot, not just because of Swindler's Grip, but because of Tipples, because you have extra resources on like a headshot turn and the rest of your cards are zero, so you end up drawing a card. Like you just have a lot of lines that end up drawing random cards, and Patch the Hole in this deck is like the deck is like I think the deck might be almost unplayable without it, or it's like so much worse without it. It's kind of crazy.
It's kind of funny how important Patch the Hole is in the blue Manta deck.
I think if you're given your choice, you'd rather be the red line deck, but the blue one, I don't think you should underestimate. It's still very strong.
Yes, I agree with you. Some of the play patterns that you described is definitely good enough to win a lot of your games.
And the best thing about the Manta Marlin decks is they just convert on offense like crazy. It feels like you just like hit your opponent super hard, and if they get into a blocking pattern, you just keep hitting them. And if they stumble into you, they kind of can't keep up and you kind of bury them. It feels like you kind of force them to do something powerful back. And if they can't, you're just going to run them over, is how I've felt about the good Manta decks. They are a little particular. They take a little bit of practice to draft, but I actually really like the Manta decks when they come together.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Did you want to talk about the playstyle, or did we already go over this?
I think we mostly covered it. The one thing I'll say is just like clearing up a couple potential misnomers is that even though the cannon deck is the guardian of the set, you usually actually kill people with overpower rather than fatigue them. The games go long, you often hit second cycle, but you usually kill them rather than fatigue them. So it's kind of like a mindset thing. You are trying to kill them. Pumps help you kill them faster. And the Manta Marlin deck is usually just killing people with damage or fatiguing them by damage. You would think that this deck is susceptible to fatigue, but I've actually found that it's pretty good at fatiguing opponents if they block too much, because you end up playing like headshots, which convert to like 2 cards, or like dry powder shots, which convert to 2 cards, or even just like 4 repeatedly kind of trades up on cards because they block 3, lose a life. And you have this endgame of your Goldfin harpoons coming in for 2, and that strips a card. And if you ever get to an end game where they have no cards left in decks, so long as you can Goldfin harpoon them, you'll get the gold back, and then you can just keep looping it. So it's kind of like the Spitfire loop for that deck if fatigue comes down to it. And the Red Spine Manta deck reminds me of Spitfire, where you're like on the front foot, and if all your opponent does is block, you often end up fatiguing them. It's like not the goal of the deck, the goal is to kill them, but you just be aware that you have a pretty strong fatigue by damage end game, and depending on how the game is going, you should be playing towards that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think this also is because there isn't a real weapon in this format that's like good. As we said, like in the Puffin episode, Blunderbuss is the only real fatigue. It's the only weapon that can fatigue people by just like activating its ability, and because of that, and Blunderbuss isn't that strong, but because of that, like it's just so hard for your opponent to actually be able to fatigue you that if you get into these like decks with like really good power and like red line, the red line deck with like a lot of just like fours, like you just get to fatigue your opponent that way.
Yeah, exactly. And you kind of sneak in these random Goldfin harpoon shots where you're just like, I had a big call in the big guns turn with like a bunch of pumps on my swift shot, or like even like multiple. You go like call in the big gun, swift shot, call in the big gun, swift shot, and you're like, I still have an action point and a gold. I'm just gonna like Marylnn, Red Spine Manta to you, and you just kind of get like a free value this way. You can also call in, you can block out, call in the big guns, Goldfin harpoon for 5. So even though you are not doing the dominate 6 thing that the cannon is doing, the random 2 power arrow attacks from Red Spine Manta like add up and are pretty real. It's like it's almost like a Spitfire. That's why I drew the comparison there. Like you do just get these random free attacks for 2 in this deck like a couple times per game, and it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's really annoying.
It also kills allies, which is really sweet. You can do like big go again attack and then just be like pick off your rigor mortis, and they're like, huh, that's killing trading a gold for my ally is pretty good.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. Okay, then I guess quickly we talk about the matchups for Marlin. I guess as always, do you want to go first or second with Marlin?
I think you just want to go second in both styles of decks. It's hard for you to get an advantage going first in a meaningful way, and I think you just rather go second.
That makes sense. I don't really have much to say. I kind of just don't know if I want to go first or second in most of my Marlin decks. Obviously the Manta decks you want to go second, but the Cannon deck sometimes like I have these spots where I'm just like, you go second and I'm just like, my hand doesn't do anything. I drew all pumps and arrows and I don't want to activate my like tricorn on this first turn of the game.
That is true. The cannon deck, I think it's at least very close between first and second. Maybe you can default to what your opponent wants. So if it's like a Gravy Bones deck and you think they have a lot of allies, you can go first. At the very least, I think the difference between first and second for the cannon deck is pretty small. And then I think Manta always wants second.
Yeah, that makes sense. I remember playing the first time playing against like the red line Manta deck. I was playing like a fatigue puffin draft deck. And then every game that I got to go second, I won. And every game I didn't get to go second, it just like completely lost, not even close. And I'm just like, what do I do? There's like this matchup is literally determined by the die roll. I don't think there's like anything either player can do to prevent this.
Yeah, so I guess go second, specific matchups. When you play into Puffin, you want to deny her first gold. Puffin's probably the most gold reliant hero in the game. And if you give them free gold, they can often pull really ahead. So make sure that when you do give them gold, it's to do something very powerful and try to deny that free gold for a while if you can. And blocking equipment really helps you play this kind of play style. And just as a note, yes, we described the red spine manta deck as a aggro deck. You're playing a whole bunch of arrows that block for 3. This deck can pivot to a very mid-range style pretty easily. That doesn't mean like you always want to, but it's just something to be aware of. That just like the red spine deck is not, I don't think it's like Syndra where you're playing a bunch of like 2 block go agains. Like some hands are like that with the pumps and you just have to send it, but you also have a fair bit of agency to block. So don't be afraid to play into this gold denial until you find something powerful if you need.
Yeah, I think the worst thing to do would be like to give Puffin some gold and then send like a mediocre turn back. Just don't do that. Like as long as you're not doing that, you should be able to win those games. But the moment you go like, okay, like take 4, I give you 2 gold, I'm gonna send like a 3 card 10 back. Like that's just like not good enough.
Yeah, I agree with that. Into Gravy Bones, I think you want to pressure them as much as possible and look for spots to not clear their allies. Marylnn often struggles to clear allies. If you have an efficient way to do it, that's fine. I see people clear allies when they could just go face and try and win the game, and I think that that's often better. I think that something that people are still coming around to is like there's lots of spots where just ignoring allies is good. And I think there's certain allies that are ignorable more so than others.
Like I think the most unignorable ally that you will come across will be probably Rigor Mortis.
Yeah, and Swabby. Basically, if they attack for a big number, they're really hard to ignore. If they're like Chowder, where they gain a life for free every turn, they're really hard to ignore. And then Barnacle's like on the edge because it attacks for 4 for free. But as soon as you start having to activate the ally to attack with it, like Cuddy Shark is like the biggest one, or like even Shelly, these cards are not good. We kind of talked about like 0 for 4, like feeling like you're falling behind in this format. And I think Cuddy Shark is exactly that. Like you play like 2 resources for 4 damage. And like, yes, they can do go again into it and sometimes generate strong cards off of Cuddy Shark, but I think predominantly like I've had opponents leave my Cuddy Shark on the board and I'm like, no, I needed you to kill this. Like I don't want to attack with this guy. You're supposed to kill it so I can gain life. Like, what do you mean you're ignoring it? And yeah, so just be aware that that's like a thing you can do. And there's also spots where you can ignore Rigor Mortis or Swabby if you know you take all their cards, or if you know that 6 damage. Like I've had points where I'm like, okay, I take all but 1 card, you Rigor Mortis for 6, I'm at 7, then I take all your cards next turn and you're fatigued. And there's just like spots where you can do that, where if you kill the Rigor Mortis, you give them a full hand, and sometimes you just die for it. So there's lots of spots you can ignore allies, and just be very aware of like fatigue, cards in deck, if they need resources to swing, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think the best way to think about it are allies are just a weapon, and if you play this game long enough, you should understand that you don't always attack with your weapon, and leaving your opponent with a weapon is fine.
Yeah, there's spots where like there's just spots where I'm like, another thing I would think about is just like if they activate that ally, like let's say they block out and activate that ally, is that good for you? Is like a good guideline. And there's lots of spots where I'm just like, man, if they block out and just like send their Cuddy Shark, like I'm so happy. Like that's like one of the best things for me that they could possibly do. So like, why would I kill this Cuddy Shark? Or and similarly, like I mentioned with the Rigor Mortis, there's just spots where like you can get their hand small enough that all they can do is swing Rigor Mortis, and you're like, that's fine. Like that, maybe that takes like 1 card from me, and my next turn as my pitch stack, and I know it's good enough. Like I just don't actually care about you swinging your Rigor Mortis. That's not most spots, because 1 resource for 6 is really strong, but they do come up occasionally, and I think being able to identify them will get you a lot of points against Gravy.
That's fair. Then let's talk about the last thing here will be the Marylnn Mirror. Like, what are we trying to do in the Marylnn Mirror?
If they're on Hammerhead, you want to keep your life total kind of high, ideally above 3, but even further above that as pumps can extend the range. But yeah, you start to get into the overpower Goldfin Harpoon endgame loop, and the game gets pretty scary pretty fast. And then against the Manta Marlin deck, it's kind of just a race. Like, I don't know. You need to do something powerful. They're an aggro deck. They're gonna get gold. Like,
You know the thing is though, I don't think the Manta Mirror happens.
yeah, I don't think the Manta Mirror happens. That's true.
like if you're on Manta, that means Manta was kind of open, right? So like it's kind of hard for you for somebody else to also be on Manta. They're probably gonna be on Canon.
That's pretty fair. Yeah, I've only that lines up with my experience. I've only played like Canon into Manta or Manta into Canon. I think Manta basically wants to string together a big turn and go over the top before getting too low to die to Canon. And Canon wants to keep Manta off of gold for a little bit if it can, and then find a big overpower to kill them. I think that games where the Canon deck is just, we kind of talked about this, but if they're just sending 7, the good Manta decks will just out efficiency you so bad it's like it's not even close. So you need to be doing something powerful at some point in the game. That doesn't mean you can't block and send big attacks. That's part of what your deck does, but you need to be playing towards something powerful, I think, to win that matchup as Canon.
Do you know a really easy way to win in as the Canon deck?
What's that?
You play King Shark Harpoon.
Ah,
Yeah, you get him for 10 overpowered. On hit, make you discard a card.
you know what card I've lost to so much against the Canon deck?
Which card?
King Kraken Harpoon. I'm just like in a spot where I'm just like, I'm at 7. I'm so safe. And then they're just like gold, 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 dominate King Kraken for 10. And I'm just like, oh, I'm at 7. No. I just died at 10 overpower from this card so many times in this format. It's like kind of crazy.
The on hit on King Kraken Harpoon is so real too, because like if you block with a non-attack action card, even if it's your only non-attack action card, it's gonna block for 2 and not 3. So like you take so much more damage to do so. And like if you like block with an attack action card and leave your non-attack in your hand, they get to rip it. So it's just like it feels bad no matter what you do against this card.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think most of the time I've just taken lethal from this card in a spot where I didn't think I was going to take lethal off that many cards, and that's been like my biggest problem playing against this card. But yeah, the on hit's also really good. King Kraken and King Shark Harpoon are some of the biggest bombs in the set, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I was so sad when I opened the King Kraken Harpoon. Was it No, it was King Shark Harpoon. I opened King Shark Harpoon at Nats, pack 3, and I was just like, no. I was on the cusp of like either being Marylnn or Puffin. I chose Puffin in like end of pack 1, like beginning of pack 2, and I'm just like, if I chose Marylnn, my deck would be fine.
Yeah, that is how it goes sometimes.
Yeah, I feel like King Shark Harpoon is one of the biggest bombs in the set. It's so good.
Okay, I think that's going to wrap us up for today with Marylnn. I think we covered more or less everything. There's multiple ways to draft this hero. I think most people know about the Canon. I think Manta's generally the one that people have less experience on. I'd encourage you to try it out. I think Manta's really good, and I think there's quite a bit of flexibility to kind of like start out Marylnn and then be either Canon or Manta, depending on the cards you see. You see lots of blue block 3s and big attacks, you go Canon. You see lots of good arrows and pumps and go agains, you go Manta. And it's just like a very flexible lane. I actually really like drafting Marylnn in this set. But yeah, hopefully this will help you out. Good luck at your nationals, and we'll see you all next week for our Gravy Bones episode. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find us on social media. I'm at Yukili Bender, and Jay is at Ueda J over on Twitter or X. And if you want to find me on Blue Sky, I'm at Yukili Bender on Blue Sky. You can email us at onthebobble@gmail.com, and you can find us at patreon.com/onthebobble if you want to join our Discord or get in touch with us there. That's going to be a wrap for this week. Good luck at Nats, and see some of you in Singapore, probably.
Yeah, probably. Not me, but definitely Yuki.
Yeah.